Good evening, I'm Bret, Baier, coming to you live from Morgantown, West Virginia, site of tonight's Republican Senate primary debate, which will begin in just 30 minutes from now. But first, we want to bring you the big news of the day. Fox News has obtained a list of questions that Special Counsel Robert Mueller wants to ask President Trump, if he gets the chance, about the Russia investigation. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us live from the North Lawn with a look at what Mueller wants to know. Good evening, John.
Bret, good evening to you. The leak of these questions comes just as the president's newly reconstituted legal team had restarted negotiations with Robert Mueller about a possible interview with the president. I'm told that tonight those negotiations are still on track, though many of the president's supporters are saying, based on this line of inquiry, the president shouldn't get anywhere near Robert Mueller. In talks with President Trump's legal team, Special Counsel Robert Mueller revealed 52 questions he wants to ask the president. 4 topics: Michael Flynn, James Comey, Jeff Sessions, and Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with a Russian attorney. Among the things Mueller wants to ask, what does President Trump know about calls that General Flynn made with Russian Ambassador Kislyak in late December 2016? And did people associated with the president reach out to Flynn or discuss Flynn seeking immunity or possible pardon? On Comey, Mueller wants to know what was the purpose of the dinner meeting the president had with Comey and whether loyalty was discussed. Also, why President Trump tweeted that Comey better hope there are no tapes. On Sessions, Comey wants to ask President Trump about the Attorney General's recusal and the president's reaction to the appointment of a special counsel. And on Don Jr., Comey wants to learn what the president knew regarding the June 9th Trump Tower meeting and when he became aware of it. Also, whether President Trump was aware of outreach by members or former members of his campaign to Russia offering potential assistance. Mueller specifically mentioned Paul Manafort. The White House, which has often weighed in on aspects of the Mueller investigation, wanted no part of this disclosure.
I would refer you to the president's outside personal attorneys. Sources
close to the investigation say the questions were developed in early March in consultations between Mueller's office and the president's outside legal team. President Trump today railed against their disclosure, tweeting it was disgraceful that the questions concerning the Russian witch hunt were leaked to the media. No questions on collusion. The White House did weigh in today in a charge from President Trump's former physician, Dr. Harold Bornstein, that in February of last year, his office was raided by then Director of Oval Office Operations Keith Schiller and Trump Organization attorney Alan Garten. Bornstein says they took all of President Trump's medical records.
That's how I feel. Raped, frightened.
The incident happened 2 days after Bornstein told the New York Times President Trump takes Propecia for hair loss. The White House today dismissed the notion of a raid.
As is standard operating procedure for a new president, the White House medical unit took possession of the president's medical records.
On Iran, the White House was defending an unfortunate typo in a statement last night that declared Iran has a robust clandestine nuclear weapons program. The White House meant to say had.
The typo that you referenced was noticed, immediately corrected.
And the president today said he is close to an announcement on his planned summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Also weighing in on South Korean President Moon Jae-in's declaration that President Trump should be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
And I think it's probably going to be announced over the next couple of days, location and date. But I thought it was very generous of President Moon.
And a development in the Michael Flynn case today. The court had requested a status report on his sentencing for making false statements today. Both Flynn's counsel and the special counsel, Robert Mueller's office, reported to the courts that based on the status of the Mueller investigation, now is not the time to be talking about sentencing Michael Flynn. Bret?
John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. President Trump said he felt vindicated after Israel's prime minister said Monday Iran lied about its nuclear intentions. But today, the United Nations Nuclear Agency did not back that up. And late this afternoon, former Secretary of State John Kerry tweeted that every detail Netanyahu presented yesterday was why the world came together to negotiate the nuclear agreement, adding, quote, blow up the deal and you're back there tomorrow. Correspondent Connor Powell reports tonight on the conflicting reports as the deadline looms for President Trump to decide whether to re-up the nuclear deal.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continued his campaign to convince President Trump to scrap the Iran nuclear deal. making the rounds on cable news this morning, telling Fox and Friends Iran is trying to, quote, bamboozle the entire world by refusing to disclose its previous nuclear ambitions.
When they did the nuclear deal with Iran, it was premised, its implementation was premised on the fact that Iran would come clean and it would admit if it had any nuclear weapons program. They didn't come clean, they lied.
However, Netanyahu's claim that Iran is currently in violation of the deal is being widely disputed. Tehran denies the accusation, insisting it's in full compliance. And only a month ago, Israel's own military chief of staff, General Eisenkot, said, at this point, we are not identifying any violations of the JCPOA. While France's foreign ministry said European leaders have known about Iran's non-civilian nuclear activities since 2002, which is consistent with the 2011 U.S. National Intelligence Estimate, which laid out Iran's nuclear program from the early 2000s. Crucially, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is responsible for the inspections in Iran, said today there is no evidence Tehran has reconstituted its nuclear program.
The JCPOA, the nuclear agreement, is based not on assumption of good faith or trust. It's based on concrete commitments, verification mechanisms, and a very strict monitoring of facts done by the IAEA. The IAEA has released 10 reports certifying that Iran has fully complied with its commitments.
During his media round today, Netanyahu was also asked about Israel's nuclear capabilities and was asked if Iran's disclosure is so important. Why won't Israel disclose its own nuclear program? Netanyahu refused to answer whether or not Israel had a nuclear weapon, insisting this isn't about Israel, but Iran. Bret?
Connor Powell in our Middle East newsroom. Connor, thanks. Attorney General Rod Rosenstein responds this afternoon to news of a House Freedom Caucus draft resolution calling for his impeachment.
They can't even resist leaking their own drafts. There have been people who have been making threats privately and publicly against me for quite some time, and I think they should understand by now the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted. We're going to do what's required by the rule of law.
House Freedom Caucus members say the document is a, quote, last resort against the man overseeing the special counsel's Russia investigation. The draft was due to what members believe is stalling by the Justice Department on the production of documents for lawmakers looking into decisions made by the Justice Department in the past 2 years. However, just last week, the chairman of the House Judiciary and House Oversight Committees announced they had reached a deal with the Justice Department about producing those records. Other news on that front, the House Judiciary and Oversight Committee chairs are also asking for more answers tonight on the special status given to the man who leaked fired FBI Director James Comey's memos on President Trump. Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte and Oversight Chairman Trey Gowdy sent a letter to Attorney General Jeff Sessions and the Deputy AG asking for them to provide more information on Daniel Richman's status at the FBI and his handling of those Comey memos. In about 20 minutes, right here on this stage, the top 3 Republican candidates in the West Virginia Senate race will be here in Morgantown for our first Fox News debate of the election season. Voters have 1 week to decide here who they will want to go up against Democratic Senator Joe Manchin this November. And as correspondent Peter Ducey reports, the candidates each have their own strategy for winning over voters.
A Republican candidate for office came up with a new nickname that makes the leader of the Senate sound like the leader of a cartel.
One of my goals as U.S. Senator will be to ditch Cocaine Mitch.
Cocaine Mitch is now in a TV ad for former Coal Baron Don Blankenship, who is now bringing McConnell's in-laws into the equation, talking about a shipping company associated with Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao's family. Blankenship's camp says, quote, the company was implicated recently in smuggling cocaine from Colombia to Europe, hidden aboard a company ship carrying foreign coal was $7 million of cocaine, and that is why we've deemed him Cocaine Mitch. McConnell has no comment, but a McConnell-linked group has already spent more than $1.3 million on ads calling Blankenship a convicted criminal. Blankenship, who recently served a year on a misdemeanor conviction tied to the deadly Upper Big Branch mine explosion, blames the conviction on anti-coal Obama allies and believes it will soon be overturned.
It'll be reversed before the general. That's the reason Mr. McConnell McConnell's very wrong.
$1.2 million in Democratic super PAC money has flowed into this race.
Is there a party going on here?
Mostly in attacks on Congressman Evan Jenkins, who is campaigning to stop an impeachment.
They're trying to take me out to take down President Trump.
When tonight's debate starts, voters in states outside West Virginia may not recognize all the candidates right away, but they'll recognize the names endorsing Attorney General Patrick Morrisey.
Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Scott Walker. Conservatives are uniting behind my candidacy because I'm the one that took on Obama overreach.
Jenkins sees a common thread among those names.
He's got Ted Cruz, who said the most vicious things about President Trump. These are all Patrick Morrisey's Never Trumper network.
Jenkins and Morrisey can settle the score tonight during the first nationally televised debate for either. Are you nervous?
You know, I think you always have a little bit of pause, but I'm excited because I think this is a chance to really frame the issues. It's not just about the nonsense TV ads.
I just spoke to Don Blankenship, who jokes that when a McConnell ally called him mentally ill, he decided to try to prove it. And that's where Cocaine Mitch came from. He also says that there's no nerves about facing an hour-long debate because he once faced 30 years in jail. Bret?
Should be interesting tonight. Peter, thank you. For more on what we can expect during tonight's Republican debate here in Morgantown, let's bring in my colleague and co-moderator for tonight's event, Martha McCallum. It should be fun.
Interesting. Jail can put things in perspective for you, I guess, for the rest of your life. So it should be interesting.
Well, you know, we were talking about how much President Trump factors in to this race, and we've worked that into, obviously, some of our thoughts about this. If you look at the 2016 election and look at the votes, Donald Trump gets 68.6% of the votes here in West Virginia over Hillary Clinton. Then you look at the recent poll that we just did, and that is the Trump approval job performance, somewhat approved 20%, strongly approved 67%. That's a big number, 87% in this state.
Yeah, and that's exactly why they're all trying to prove that they're closer to President Trump than Joe Manchin, who's been moderate on a lot of issues. He and the president have agreed on a few things, but so they're trying to carve out the space that is to the right of Joe Manchin, and they believe that the electorate in West Virginia wants to send a Republican to the Senate, and that's what these guys are going to be out there trying to prove. It's going to be a bruiser. I mean, this has been a very intense campaign so far, especially Morrisey and Jenkins are really going at each other on the airways in West Virginia, so it's going to be quite a night.
Yeah, well, and you know, the balance of power at the U.S. Senate hangs in the balance, possibly off of this race. If you look at the issues that really matter to voters in West Virginia, the opioid crisis really is up there, because it's such a crisis here.
I mean, it's felt all across the country. This is an issue that everybody can relate to. But keep in mind that it is worse here than anywhere else in the country. And these candidates have to answer the question, what will you do? How can you get your arms around this issue? You know, I mean, when you look at the death rate, it's worse than any other instance in the country in terms of how many people are taken. Everybody knows somebody who's been affected. It's going to be a big topic tonight.
Yeah. Well, it'll be fun. See you in a bit.
Yeah, I'll see you in a bit.
And the story afterwards. Thank you, Martha. You can follow all the big congressional races of 2018 right here on Fox News Channel and, of course, on our website, foxnews.com. You click on America's Election HQ map. Very cool. In the upper right of the page, there you find this interactive map that just started yesterday. All the details on all the hot contests around the country as candidates battle for control of the Senate, the House this November. Check it out. It's a lot of fun. You'll be there for definitely a few minutes. Up next, we're live at the border where some asylum seekers have crossed into the U.S. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 10 in Phoenix, where educators are keeping up the pressure on lawmakers by extending a teacher walkout into Wednesday. You know, that walkout actually started here in West Virginia. Educators have been gathering at the Capitol for several days, protesting low pay and school funding as the legislature in Arizona works on a budget deal. Fox 35 in Orlando, where an Ocala neighborhood is dealing with yet another sinkhole, a major one, adding to nearly a dozen holes that have formed since last week. At least 8 families have been displaced as engineers work to fill those holes. And this is a live look at San Francisco from our affiliate Fox 2. Out there, the big story tonight, a showdown over high gas prices and the condition of California's roads. California conservatives want to repeal a recent increase in gas taxes and vehicle registration fees, and turned in nearly 1 million signatures this week to put the question before voters this November. The move comes days after transportation officials announced billions of dollars in mass transit improvements funded in part by those tax hikes. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We are outside the Beltway, too, back here in West Virginia after a quick break. Welcome back to West Virginia. A sliver of hope today for migrants along the U.S.-Mexico border as a number of people got their chance to make their asylum claims in the U.S. National correspondent William Lajeunesse reports from Tijuana tonight on who made it through.
I have faith that I will get across, and the first thing I want to do is work to give my girls a good future.
This family from El Salvador can see its future less than a mile away.
We felt bad because they didn't let them through, but here we are, and I believe and have faith in God that we will get across to the other side.
Sunday, the U.S. refused to accept caravan members, citing capacity issues. Monday, it relented, hearing 8 asylum claims from 3 women, 4 children, and an 18-year-old male.
We are happy celebrating. These are 8 families who don't have to suffer anymore, who have the opportunity to reach a court.
Roughly 150 caravan members wait in a makeshift camp next to the border for their turn to claim asylum. After their interview, some will be detained, others will be set free in the U.S.
When they show up in immigration court, if they show up in immigration court, the judges find very few. I think the last numbers I looked at, between 30 and 40% actually would have a credible fear finding.
Even this woman admits processing the caravan could encourage more Central Americans to make the trip and claim asylum.
Everything in our country is very dangerous, and what they're looking for is well-being for them where they're not in danger.
San Ysidro is the nation's busiest port of entry. This video shows how asylum cases are prioritized. Small refugee groups are moved onto a pedestrian causeway between the 2 countries. As of this morning, this group was next.
Morelia, Guadalajara, Apatzingán.
We met this man from Mexico on Friday. He too hopes to claim asylum, though he is now pushed to the back of the line.
We've all lived the same experiences. We're all running from the same violence. I've talked to some of them, and we're all the same. We're looking for a better life.
So 28 caravan members have cleared asylum, their interview, as well as they're now in U.S. detention. U.S. officials say they will process more as space and staff allows, but Bret, the math tells us that clearing all 150 could take several more days. Back to you.
William Lajeunesse, live in Tijuana, Mexico. William, thank you. So what do you think? Do you think the slow processing of these migrants at the border will stop others from coming, slow it down? Let me know on Twitter at Bret Baier. You can use the hashtag Special Report, or on Facebook at facebook.com/BretBaierSR. Now turning to Arizona, firefighters there are marking the start of what's expected to be a very busy fire season out west, battling a blaze that's already burned through more than 11,000 acres. Senior correspondent Adam Housley reports tonight on the Tinder fire.
Strong winds continue to stoke the Tinder fire northeast of Phoenix, causing spot fires and erratic behavior that's resulted in more than 18 square miles burned and more than 1,000 homes and cabins threatened.
I've got 2 houses up there. My son lived in one. It has burned. I know it's gone.
Sunday morning, get out. It's coming, and it was very scary to see that. You know, the fire right there. When it comes down to it, you hear people say it all the time. That's really all that matters, is that the people are safe.
So far, FEMA says 1,000 people are under mandatory evacuation orders in an area southwest of Winslow, and thankfully there have been no injuries or deaths, as that part of Arizona suffers through an extreme drought, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Firefighters and evacuees say the conditions thus far have been brutal.
And the winds were screaming, just screaming, howling so loud, whistling through the trees, things slamming around.
We did have a very significant evacuation, very well run, timely, well ahead of the fire front.
As weather conditions improve just a bit with a small chance of rain in the forecast, Arizona's Governor Doug Ducey has declared a state of emergency to help fund firefighters and recovery efforts. There are hopes of at least some containment in the next 24 hours, and there's still no set numbers of how many homes have been destroyed. Bret.
Adam, thank you. California is taking on the Trump administration over the Environmental Protection Agency's plan to toss Obama-era vehicle emission standards. The state's attorney general said he's filing a lawsuit challenging the EPA's determination that emission requirements are too stringent. 16 states and the District of Columbia are joining California in that lawsuit. On the markets today, roller coaster day on Wall Street. The Dow finished down 64 after being down more than 350 points earlier in the day. The S&P 500 gained 7. The Nasdaq jumped 64. Well, he hasn't even been on the job for a week, but already new Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is promising to help the State Department get their, quote, swagger back. Just how does he plan to do that? Correspondent Rich Edson reports.
Secretary Mike Pompeo's first day at State Department headquarters, addressing the employees he'll lead executing American foreign policy.
The United States diplomatic corps needs to be in every corner, every stretch of the world, executing missions on behalf of this country.
This is a typical address for an incoming Secretary of State. Unusual that Pompeo has already led a high-level diplomatic mission to Belgium for NATO meetings, and then Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Jordan, the United States' strongest allies in the region.
I think I have the record for the longest trip to the first day of work. And I am humbled to be here. I tried to prepare myself for this moment, but to stand here and look at the most important diplomatic corps in the world is enormously humbling to me.
For this West Point graduate, diplomacy extends beyond fighting in Afghanistan and Ukraine and threats from Iran and North Korea. The Trump administration is also trying to alter economic relationships. President Trump has dispatched a delegation to China, his top economic advisors, with sometimes very different strategies to address the nearly $400 billion annual trade deficit with China, forced transfers of American technology to Chinese companies, and tariffs and restraints on American imports. The Trump administration is also pushing for trade concessions from European and North American allies. The White House is delaying for 1 month tariffs on imported steel and aluminum from Canada, Mexico, and the European Union.
We are extending those negotiations because we've seen some progress. I'm not going to get ahead of what that may look like, but we have 30 days to continue in those negotiations and hopeful that we can get something that works for everybody.
In a statement, the European Commission says, quote, the U.S. decision prolongs market uncertainty, which is already affecting business decisions. As a longstanding partner and friend of the U.S., we will not negotiate under threat. Though German officials say they want to reach an agreement.
I firmly believe that in the best interest of jobs in Germany, in Europe, but also in the United States, we need a permanent arrangement, and that increasing tariffs is the wrong way forward.
The U.S.'s trade representative, Robert Lighthizer, says he hopes in the coming weeks to conclude those ongoing negotiations to update NAFTA. He plans on meeting with counterparts from Mexico and Canada next week, just as soon as he returns from these trade talks in China. Bret?
Rich Edson, live at the State Department. Rich, thank you. And thank you for inviting us into your home tonight. That's it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and still unafraid. We're going to take a quick break just to give me time to get downstairs to the set to join Martha for the first Fox News debate ahead of the 2018 midterm elections. Here in West Virginia, Republicans are hoping to flip a Senate seat from blue to red, and the 3 top candidates are here to make their pitch to the audience and you at home. We'll ask them the big questions, the big issues next.
It's the kickoff of the 2018 election season. The midterms with control of Congress hanging in the balance.
We cannot be complacent. We got to fight like hell, and we got to win the House, and we got to win the Senate.
A critical Senate race could lie here in West Virginia, the heart of Trump country, where the president's approval stands at 87% tonight.
It's wonderful to be back in West Virginia. It was a very special place during the election for me. It was not even close, was it, huh?
Republicans looking to take the seat from incumbent Democrat Senator Joe Manchin. The senior senator has been hit for voting against repealing Obamacare and against the Trump tax cuts.
Your senator, Joe, he voted against. No, it was bad. I thought he would be helpful, but he votes against everything, and he voted against our tax cuts.
In a state rocked by a deadly opioid epidemic, a coal mining industry barely hanging on,
and a teacher walkout that sparked nationwide school funding strikes. Tonight, 3 GOP candidates face off on the issues. Frontrunner Congressman Evan Jenkins.
I'm the only one up there in Washington actually working with him to drain the swamp.
Patrick Morrissey, the state's attorney general.
I'm the only clear conservative choice in this race.
And Don Blankenship, a former coal baron who served a year in jail over a deadly coal mining accident.
They think they can beat me, but they haven't beat me yet.
The top three Republican candidates battle it out on policy and politics as West Virginia takes center stage.
In the first of our series of debates across the country, leading up to the midterms.
It all starts right now on America's election headquarters.
Welcome to the Metropolitan Theater here in Morgantown, West Virginia, and the kickoff of the 2018 midterm primary debates. Good evening. I'm Bret Baier.
And I'm Martha McCallum. Tonight you will hear from the candidates vying to take on Democrat Senator Joe Manchin in November. President Trump won big here in 2016, and Republicans believe that this seat may be ripe for the taking.
So let's meet the candidates. First, we have Congressman Evan Jenkins, representing the 3rd District of West Virginia. Then West Virginia, Attorney General Patrick Morrissey. And finally, former CEO of Massey Energy, Don Blankenship. Candidates, welcome.
So the rules of the debate are simple. Candidates will have 60 seconds to answer the questions, 30 seconds if they're given a follow-up after that question, and they also get 30 seconds if their name is mentioned by one of the other candidates.
If the candidates go over their allotted time, they will hear this. Now, we don't like to use it because some of the dogs at home think that somebody's at the door, so let's try not to use the bell, and let's get going.
We'll do the best we can. All right. Well, as you all know, the opioid epidemic has hit this country hard, and we're going to talk about that in great detail tonight. But let's get started at the top of our questions.
Congressman Jenkins, first to you. You are at the center of the stage tonight because you're leading in our latest Fox News poll in this race. Your opponents on this stage, however, call you a card-carrying member of the political establishment. You voted for the $1.3 trillion spending bill, which conservatives called a bloated betrayal, essentially. And Republicans aligned with Senator Mitch McConnell are spending money to help your campaign. So I guess the question is, how do you convince West Virginia voters that you can drain the swamp if they think you're a part of it?
Well, thank you, Bret, and thank you, Martha, and thank you to each and every one of you who are here this evening. I'm a proud West Virginian. You know, I haven't been up in the swamp very long. I took out a 38-year Democrat incumbent just a couple of years ago. I'm up in Washington actually working with President Trump. I have been fighting the establishment. I've been fighting the swamp. And what a difference an election makes. Look, we're already starting to see West Virginia turning around, working with President Trump, standing up with him. You know, I proudly endorsed President Trump in the May primary 2016, the only one up here on the stage who did that, and have been standing with him each and every day. So we are bringing real results. Yes, we're cutting taxes. Yes, we're reducing regulations. We're making a real difference in West Virginia. In fact, leading the country in a lot of ways, standing up for what we believe as West Virginians.
Congressman, thank you.
Mr. Blankenship, you were recently in prison for a year on a conviction in the UBB mine explosion case. You have blamed the Obama Justice Department and that administration's war on coal, but many of these mining families did blame you. Can you blame them if they don't think it's right for you to go from the jail cell to the United States Senate?
I don't think that's the question we need to be asking. I think the question we need to be asking is whether we can prevent Upper Big Branch from happening again. This time it happened because the government cut the air in half, and that work was finished only 8 hours before a mine that had been in existence for 17 years exploded. Basically, the government didn't blame me. They blamed the coal miners for not doing their job, which was terribly untrue. The miners had probably 400 years of experience. They did their job. Had I plea bargained during the trial, I would have been admitting that the miners did not do their job. So I couldn't do that. I faced 30 years in prison for a fake charge, and I beat all 3 of the felonies. They put me in jail because I did not stop the coal miners from telling each other that the inspectors had arrived. That's not a law that's on the books.
That's the law that the Obama prosecutors made up in preparation for the trial. And the trial was incredibly violative of a person's human rights to a fair trial. They did things like, in order to comply with the rule that they have to give us the documents they're going to use at trial, they gave us 1.5 million documents and told us that the documents they were going to use were in there somewhere. It's incredible. They sent me to prison for a misdemeanor. I was the only prisoner there that was a misdemeanor. It was clear from the beginning to the end that it was a fake prosecution.
But, sir, what do you say to those who say that you have made it about you? Do you accept any responsibility for the deaths of those 29 miners?
No, I'm accepting responsibility to do everything I can to keep it from happening again. The government cut the air in half. The job was finished 8 hours before the explosion. There's not much else you can say about it. You have to have an explosive atmosphere, no matter whether you have sharp bits or dull bits or plugged water sprays or no water sprays, you have to have an explosive atmosphere. The way you prevent an explosive atmosphere is a lot of airflow. And these guys begged MSHA, i.e. the government, not to make that change. The government should apologize to them and tell them the truth.
Why didn't you insist they didn't make that change?
Because I was not aware that they were making those changes. When you have 119 coal mines, it's impossible to keep up with what every one of them are doing. The things we need to do is we need to bifurcate MSHA into a regulatory and an inspector group, investigative group like NTSB and FAA are in the aviation industry. We use maximum technology in the mines to control the atmosphere. And we also need to have a relief valve when the government's trying to make you do something that you don't want to do, and your engineers are at odds with the government's engineers. They shouldn't be able to dictate what you do.
Mr. Morsi, this is not your first attempt to get elected to Congress. You first ran in your native New Jersey, which Congressman Jenkins often mentions on the campaign trail. Joe Manchin grew up here and never left. He will surely call you a carpetbagger. So how do you counter that claim?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity that Fox News is giving us to be here tonight to show off West Virginia. We have an amazing state. And I feel very fortunate that I'm one of the folks up here who moved to the state by choice. I love West Virginia with all the fiber in my being. And that's one of the reasons why when I ran for Attorney General, I knew we needed to change. We had a 20-year incumbent who was wreaking havoc on the state of West Virginia. I knew we need a conservative fighter to go after Obama overreach and give Obama everything he had. Fortunately, I was able to win in court time after time after time against Barack Obama. If anyone raises West Virginia values with me, show me someone who's done more to go after the absolute wretched excess of the Barack Obama era. We went after it. We won the Clean Power Plan, illegal amnesty. We've been fighting for pro-life principles. We're the conservative fighter of anyone standing here tonight.
Well, we've been watching all of your commercials and your ads going after each other. And so, Congressman Jenkins, I got to ask you, I'm from New Jersey. What are New Jersey values and what's wrong with them?
Well, all you have to do is look at his ad when he ran for Congress in New Jersey. Great picture of him, his campaign logo with Jersey. And the ad said, I will stand up and fight anybody who goes against Jersey values. You know what? We need somebody representing our values. You can't change your values just because you change your zip code.
But what are Jersey values as opposed to West Virginia values?
Again, she's from New Jersey.
I'll let you define. We got two folks from Jersey here. I'll let you all talk about
you said there was something wrong with them, so I'm just curious. What's wrong with them?
I'll tell you what. You know what, West Virginia?
Morsi, we'll get you in a second.
And you know, I appreciate you being here. You know what? We do welcome. We do welcome outsiders. We love having you here. People need to be coming to West Virginia for the right reasons. You know, Patrick Morsi grew up in Jersey, made all of his living and his money and his millions of bucks lobbying in Washington, D.C., and then he went back to Jersey to run for Congress, and he did on his Jersey values theme. He came in last place in a Republican primary, then he moved back to Washington, D.C., making more money, and then he came to West Virginia, put his name on the ballot. You know, West Virginians see through that. This is not about shopping for a state for your political career. Candidly, we had that with a very well-heeled Democrat who moved to West Virginia out of the Northeast. Once they set up shop, it's it's tough to get them out. We welcome outsiders. We love people moving to West Virginia, but we want them coming to West Virginia for the right reasons.
I don't think you're getting an answer on your values, but let's have a response, Ms. Attorney General Morrissey.
Well, a couple things. First, I think it's very clear West Virginians want someone with conservative values. And I look up here on stage and I can say, I'm the only one on this stage who has always been a conservative. I've been strongly pro-life my entire career. Second Amendment rights. There's a reason why I'm the endorsed West Virginians for Life candidate, the Second Amendment group candidate, the conservative back candidate, because people know I have the conservative West Virginia values. If you look at the congressman, he actually has been very liberal. If you go Obamacare, checkbox, he supported. Hillary, he went and rallied for Hillary. Nancy Pelosi, John Kerry, Planned Parenthood spending just a couple weeks ago. Evan, you should be ashamed of yourself for that outrageous vote, killing the unborn.
Congressman, your response?
Well, fortunately, Patrick's not being honest. There's not a penny in the bill that we passed to fund the federal government that's going to Planned Parenthood. If any money goes to Planned Parenthood, that's going to be the Trump administration. I actually led the charge. I've fought to defund Planned Parenthood. I have stood up for life, and as a matter of fact, the National Right to Life organization has given me a 100% voting record. You know, I'm the one that actually has a voting record. Patrick, Don, others can talk about how they will vote. 100% pro-life, 100% defending the Second Amendment with the national right to life. I will tell you, I won't allow you to challenge my West Virginia values, my proud history of fighting for our state each and every day of my life.
Mr. Blankenship, let's get you in the mix here. When you're asked about the carpetbagger question, you respond that, you know, a lot of people have houses in different states. But Mr. Blankenship, isn't it true that you live in Nevada? You pay taxes in Nevada. And in fact, your probation officer is in Nevada, and yet you're running for U.S. Senate in West Virginia.
Yeah, I paid probably more taxes than anybody on this stage to West Virginia. If it weren't for me, neither of these two guys would be up here. It's funny that that Pat says the only conservative on the stage. Conservatives weren't even popular in West Virginia until I caused them to be conservative by investing about $5 million of my own money. Honesty. I mean, it's funny to hear politicians talk about honesty. I think that's odd. And as far as a voting record, I voted for the unborn when I've given hundreds of thousands of dollars to Right to Life. That's a real vote. You know, being able to vote or sue on using the state's money or whatever, that's pretty easy to do. It doesn't take any personal sacrifice to do that. I've made a lot of personal sacrifices, if you will, to stop the bond that would have wasted money in West Virginia, to cut your food tax, which has saved all West Virginians a lot of money. Those types of sacrifices where you're a conservative or you take a position that's not popular is what it's going to take to drain the swamp. You can't drain the swamp being like the swamp.
And if Joe Manchin comes after you for living in Nevada, what do you say?
Then he's lived in D.C. too long.
Martha.
Congressman Jenkins, you were a Democrat, and then you were a Republican, and then you were a Democrat again, and then about 5 years ago you became a Republican again. So how do you convince these people who've come tonight and the other Republicans in West Virginia that if there is a blue wave come November and the tide turns again, that you won't flip again?
I am a proud Republican. I'm a proud West Virginia. I've always put my West Virginia values first. You know, Barack Obama devastated our state and our country. He put literally thousands of coal miners out of work. Look at the Democratic platform, supports abortion on demand, gun grabbers limiting our Second Amendment. You know, the West Virginia story is we are a proud red state. Look, in the Republican primary, Donald Trump won West Virginia by 77 points. He won the general by 44 points. Yet Donald Trump was a Democrat. Ronald Reagan was a Democrat. It's the people who follow their values and put their values first rather than their party registration. I simply couldn't be a part of a Democratic Party that was so wrong for West Virginia, so wrong for who we are and what we believe. I will always stand up for our state. I will always stand up for our values. So standing up with this president for what we believe, that's an easy choice for me. That's something I'll always do.
So what would you say to the charge that you're too similar, that you're just another Joe Manchin with a little less experience?
I welcome the opportunity to face Joe Manchin in the November primary. I voted to cut the taxes and put more money in people's pockets. Joe Manchin voted no. I voted to defund Planned Parenthood. Joe Manchin voted to fund Planned Parenthood. I voted to reduce the regulations, bringing our West Virginia jobs back. Joe Manchin is on the Chuck Schumer team. He's sitting there with Elizabeth Warren, with Bernie Sanders. He's got a 70–80% voting record with them. That's not West Virginia. I welcome the opportunity to take on Joe Manchin this November and replace him and bring a much-needed Republican vote to the United States Senate.
Mr. Morrissey, you're running as an insurgent Republican, a political outsider, but you worked on Capitol Hill and as a big money lobbyist in D.C. So how are you not a creature of the swamp?
Well, I think it's very clear of all the candidates on the stage, I'm actually the only one with a conservative record of results. And when so many people here on the stage either abandoned the state or they were on the Barack Obama team, I was literally by myself suing Barack Obama because he threatened our way of life here in West Virginia. He came after our coal jobs. I was the only one to stand up. I fought against Barack Obama. We took him all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. We beat him 5-4. That was not an easy thing to do. We built a 27-state coalition to do that. We went after Obama's illegal amnesty. These guys were inactive in all these fights. When West Virginia needed a proven conservative fighter to change the abortion laws in our state, neither of these guys were around. They wouldn't weigh in at the time. I stood up, and now we have a pain-capable law protecting the unborn. That's why West Virginians for Life has endorsed my candidates. That's why the conservatives have gotten behind me. They know we have a strong conservative record. And we've gone after Washington a lot harder than these guys ever could. You got to put large conservative coalitions together. That's what I've done. These coalitions would look like Hillary and Pelosi and Kerry. That's not the change we need.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General.
Well, the opioid epidemic has hit the country hard, and nowhere harder than here in West Virginia. Here's Rick Leventhal.
Police! It's hard to find anyone who hasn't been touched in some way by the opioid epidemic, killing more Americans every year than car crashes and guns. In 2016, U.S. government statistics show more than 63,000 Americans died from drug overdoses, more than 42,000 of them from opioids. By comparison, roughly 37,000 died in car crashes, 38,000 from gunshots. West Virginia is an unfortunate leader in the opioid crisis with the highest drug overdose rate in the nation, 52 deaths per every 100,000 residents, beating the next closest state by more than 20%, doubling the national average. Last December, the governor called in the National Guard for logistical support and tried to help tackle the epidemic. Last year was the state's worst, with roughly 1,000 people dying from opiate ODs, far surpassing the 884 lives lost in 2016, part of a steady rise of fatalities in West Virginia since the start of this century. One reason for West Virginia's issues is the easy availability of the pills. Between 2007 and 2012, drug wholesalers shipped 780 million hydrocodone and oxycodone pills into the state, which economists estimate cost West Virginia nearly $1 billion in lost productivity and resources to address the issue.
Congressman Jenkins, you have been representing southern West Virginia for 24 years. Small towns like Kermit and Williamson, both in your district, have been flooded with enough hydrocodone and oxycodone to supply thousands of pills to every man, woman, and child. So what makes you believe that you deserve a promotion when the district that you represent is ground zero for the opioid crisis?
Well, we've been making a real difference, and we are seeing progress. We have here two ladies. They called me 5 years ago, Sarah and Rhonda, two nurses that saw these precious newborn babies that had been drug exposed during pregnancy. And through a labor of love, Rhonda, Sarah, me, and some others started Lily's Place, a facility that Melania Trump actually came and visited, giving every child a healthy start in life. And what I really like about that piece is they're talking about the flood of opioids. Patrick Morsi and his family lobbying firm in Washington, D.C., Cardinal Health. Cardinal, it's not our state bird, it's the pusher of all these pills. He and his family lobbying firm have made millions and millions in his 18 years as a D.C. lobbyist and Hill staffer. They have flooded our state with these pain pills that have devastated people in West Virginia. If you want to see what the problem is, it is the pill pushers. And Patrick Morsi has represented those people for years and made millions.
Our first bell of the evening, but Mr. Morsi?
Well, there Evan goes yet again. He's lies just keeping out. Did your mom ever tell you that we should wash your mouth out with soap with those lies? You know? I'll tell you what. Obviously, not only do people know we didn't work on those issues in the private sector, but no one has done more to go after the opiate epidemic. Suing, going after entities, $78 million in damages from the pharmaceutical companies. Recently, we just went after the DEA because that federal government agency had been blanketing the state. They were rubber stamping the applications coming in, flooding West Virginia with pills. We went after it. We're putting an end to that. Education in the schools, and obviously we're going after treatment as well, because we have to address people's needs in their heads and their hearts. I'll conclude on this note. All of us, including me and my family, we've seen issues with addiction. There's no one here tonight that hasn't felt it. And for someone like Evan Jenkins to cheapen the political dialogue, to say things that are not true, to hide his deep liberal background, I think is very sad.
Mr. Morsi, I understand what you're saying there, but as Attorney General, you did sue this major pill distributor. But at the very same time, your wife was lobbying for that pill distributor. Is that not a conflict of interest?
No. Look, we have handled everything exactly right, and I think most people around the state would say we've been more effective taking on the opiate epidemic than anyone. I would note when I got into office, there was no substance abuse fighting unit in the state. So we've turned things around. The other point, which is important, you cited it. The statistics from 2007 to 2012, well, look, Joe Manchin was on the watch as governor. He was sleeping at the switch when pills were flooding into our state, and it took me in the AG's office to go after that aggressively.
Hey, Bret.
I'm going to get Mr. Blankenship in.
When he came into office, Cardinal Health paid for his inaugural party. They were so happy that Patrick Morsi had won the Attorney General. They knew they had a friend.
All right, quickly, Mr. Morsi, respond.
Inaugural party. Return the money.
He has a pain pill pledge.
Sign my pain pill pledge.
He has a pain pill pledge that's a fraud because he's taken tens of thousands of dollars that he won't return. So this is what we call hypocrisy.
All right,
and Evan, I wish you would stop.
Let's get Mr. Blankenship in here. So you have talked tough on opioids.
In fact, I'd like to address some of what they said.
You will.
Let me ask you the question, and then you can. In fact, you want to drug test everyone from lawmakers to teachers. What about the other side of this issue? Do you have empathy for addicts?
Well, I don't think empathy is going to fix the problem. I think if we stop the drug abuse, we don't need to have empathy, and that's more important. But let me say again that Patrick said he's the only conservative up here. I've already explained that neither one of them would be up here without me. And both of them are misleading. Patrick Morsi came to West Virginia in 2012. He's been here 6 years. Drug abuse deaths have gone up 63%, and they're continuing to be on the rise. They're up 500 and some percent since Evan first went to Charleston. They like to talk about endorsements. Most of Patrick Morsi's endorsements are the same endorsements that Joe Manchin had. You know, conservatives don't go out and take campaign contributions from Planned Parenthood. And conservatives don't accept money from drug companies that are flooding West Virginia with opiates. So I'll leave it with that.
We have much more ahead, and we will give you plenty of time to respond. We got to take a commercial break very quickly. Coming up, they all said they would drain the swamp, but which one of these candidates would support Senator Mitch McConnell?
We will ask them as the debate continues live in Morgantown, West Virginia.
West Virginia.